Hare Krishna. Is my screen visible?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Visible?
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll start with the Mangalacharan. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumiltam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Tapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamupagadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yudhapatakalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavascha Sri Rupam Sagjadam Sagana Raghunathan Vidam Stam Sijivam Sadvaitam Saudutam Paljana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakanitamcha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Hare Krishna. So today we'll be looking at verse number 21 from chapter 10, first canto. Savai kilayam purusha puratano ya eka asid avisheshatmani agre gunebhyo jagatatmanishware निमीली तत्मानिषि सुप्त शक्तिषु सवै किलायां पुरुष पुरातनो य एक आसीत् अविशेष आत्मनि अग्रे गुणेभ्यो जगतात्मनीश्वरे निमीलितात्मनिषि सुप्त शक्तिषु सवै किलायं पुरुष पुरातनो य एक आसीत् अविशेष आत्मनि अग्रे गुणेभ्यो जगतात्मनीश्वरे निमीलितात्मनिषि सुप्त शक्तिषु. Anyone want to try recite the verse?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Kilayam Purusha Puratano Ya Eka Ashit Avishesha Atmani Agre Gunebhyo Jagat Atmanishware Nimili Tatmanishi Supta Shaktisu.
Thank you, Mataji. Anyone else? Okay, we'll proceed with the synonyms. Sa, he, Krishna. Why? As I remember. Kila, definitely. I am this. Purusha, personality of Godhead. Puratana, the original. Ya, who. Eka, only one. Asit, existed. Avishesha, materially unmanifested. Atmani, own self. Agre, before creation. Gunebhya, of the modes of nature. Jagatatmani, unto the super soul. Ishvare, unto the supreme lord. Nimilita, merged into. Atman, the living entity. Nishi Supta, inactive at night. Shaktishu, of the energies. They say here he is the original personality of Godhead, as we definitely remember him. He alone existed before the manifested creation of the modes of nature. and in him only, because he is the Supreme Lord, all living beings merge as if sleeping at night, their energy is suspended. So this verse is referring to how Krishna is the source of the material creation, and the material creation actually starts with the Purusha avatars. So before I proceed with the purport, can anyone explain regarding the Purusha avatars? Just a very simple explanation. Any volunteers? Because we have discussed regarding these Purusha avatars in many of our previous sessions. Anyone? Okay, so I'll proceed with the purport. There are two types of dissolution of the manifested cosmos. At the end of every 4.32 billion solar years, when Brahma, the lord of one particular universe, goes to sleep, there's one annihilation. And at the end of Lord Brahma's life, which takes place at the end of Brahma's 100 years of age, in our calculation, at the end of 8.64 billion times 30 times 12 times 100 solar years, there is complete annihilation of the entire universe. And in both the periods, both the material energy called the Mahatattva and the marginal energy called Jiva Tattva merge in the person of the Supreme Lord. The living beings remain asleep within the body of the Lord until there's another creation of the material world. And that is the way of the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material manifestation. So here it is referring to the two types of annihilation which occur, one during Brahma's night, and the other is at the end of Brahma's life. So regarding the Purusha avatars, we know that there are three types of Purusha avatars. So firstly, it starts from Mahavishnu. Then the material universes are created through the breathing of Mahavishnu. When he exhales, the water bubbles which emanate from his bodily pores, each of those bubbles form one material universe, and then Mahavishnu expands himself in the form of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu into each of those bubbles, meaning into each of those material universes. So every material universe is governed by one Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, who becomes the source of Brahma within each material universe. And Brahma lives for 100 years according to his calendar. So we have also seen regarding this calculation of Brahma's day and night, and also his entire lifetime in many of our previous sessions. So roughly, there are 1,000 Chaturyugas or Divya Yugas which make up Brahma's day and night. So the four Chaturyugas, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali, they can be expressed in terms of our human earth years, or even in terms of demigod years. But if it's in terms of our human earth years, the duration of Kali Yuga is 432,000 earth years. So that is the duration for one Kali Yuga. Dwapara Yuga is actually double the duration of Kali. Treta is times 3, Satya is times 4. So the total duration for the 4 Chaturyugas is actually 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, meaning 10 times 432,000 earth years. So one Chaturyuga is equal to 4.32 million earth years, or as Prabhupada has mentioned here, solar years. So one Chaturyuga's duration is 4.32 million. So 1,000 of such Chaturyugas will be equal to 4.32 billion years. So that is the duration of Brahma's day. His daytime, meaning it's like his 12 hours of his entire day. So one full day of Brahma is equal to 8.64 billion solar years. So that's how we get 8.64 billion. 8.64 billion solar years times 30 per month times 12 months times 100 solar years. So that is the total duration of Brahma's lifetime for his 100 years. And after those 100 years, even Brahma has to die because he is also a Jiva Tattva, part of this material universe. So during Brahma's night, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, who is lying on the Garbhodaka ocean, he gives birth to Brahma, and the 14 planetary systems are situated along the stem of the lotus, on which Brahma is sitting there on top. So Satyaloka, the abode of Brahma, is situated on top of the lotus, and along the stem, the 14 planetary systems are located, 14 including Satyaloka. So during Brahma's night, the water levels of Garbhodaka ocean will rise, and all these planets below Satyaloka will get submerged by this Garbhodaka ocean's water, and that's how the material planets become unmanifest. So during the next day, once Brahma's daytime starts, the water level subsides, and these planets become manifest again. But during Brahma's night, when the planets get submerged, the Jiva Tattvas get annihilated, and then the manifestation starts again during Brahma's daytime. So these stages of becoming manifest and unmanifest, these continue throughout 100 years of Brahma's life, and that is one type of annihilation. It's like a partial dissolution, and that's the complete annihilation, which happens at the end of Brahma's life after 100 years. During that time, even Brahma dies. So that is the complete annihilation, after following which all these material universes, the water bubbles, they get merged into the body of Mahavishnu. The material creation is effected by the interaction of the three modes of material nature set in action by the Lord, and therefore it is said here that the Lord existed before the modes of material nature were set in motion. So even in Gita chapter 7, Krishna talks about how these modes of material nature, which are merely byproducts of his inferior material energy, how these elements make up the material universes. Like in Gita 7.4, he talks about the material energy, and then in 7.5 he talks about the marginal energy, and also in 7.12 and 13 Krishna talks about how these material energy and the modes of material nature are actually subservient to him, because he is the source of the material energy and also the modes of material nature. So the modes of material nature are merely byproducts of Krishna's inferior material energy. In the Shruti mantra, it is said that only Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, existed before the creation, and there was no Brahma, Shiva, or other demigods. Vishnu means the Mahavishnu, who's lying on the causal ocean. By his breathing only, all the universes are generated in seeds and gradually develop into gigantic forms with innumerable planets within each and every universe. The seeds of universes develop into gigantic forms in the way seeds of a banyan tree develop into numberless banyan trees. So Mahavishnu is the prime cause for the entire material creation. So that's why he resides in the causal ocean, which is also known as Karna ocean, which becomes the cause of the entire material creation. However, Mahavishnu himself is an expansion of Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan, who resides in Goloka Vrindavan in the spiritual abode. So as we have also seen from Srimad Bhagavatam in our previous sessions, in most of our Friday sessions, so we have also seen that in the second canto, Brahma explains to Narada Muni regarding how he's merely involved in the business of sub-creation, because there are two types of creation. One is the primary creation called Sarga, followed by Visarga, which is the secondary type of creation. So Brahma explains to Narada Muni, saying that he's only responsible for recreating or rediscovering what has already been discovered by Lord Krishna. So even Mahavishnu himself is an expansion of Swayam Bhagavan Krishna, who is there in Goloka Vrindavan in the spiritual abode. And it is also explained in those verses from the second canto that the spiritual abode or the spiritual energy represents the three-part vibhuti, or three-fourths of the entire creation or the entire energy of the Supreme Lord. So the spiritual energy or the spiritual abode represents three-fourths of the Supreme Lord's energy, and only the remaining one-fourth, Ekapada Vibhuti, that is the composition of the material nature or Krishna's material energy. So Mahavishnu himself is merely an expansion who becomes the cause for this material creation through the causal ocean. So when Mahavishnu breathes in and out in his Yoga Nidra, so when he exhales, the water bubbles which emanate from his bodily pores, those water bubbles form every material universe, and these material universes remain until he inhales them. So once he inhales those material universes together with the Jiva Tattvas also get merged into the body of Mahavishnu. But during this process, it doesn't mean that all the Jiva Tattvas merge into him literally to the point where they kind of lose their individual identity. Even these Jiva Tattvas, they are also spirit souls, so they still maintain their individuality. When Mahavishnu inhales, these Jiva Tattvas, they merely merge into the body of Mahavishnu to take refuge within his body. So the body of Mahavishnu becomes like a temporary residence for these Jiva Tattvas until the next creation takes place. So by the time Mahavishnu exhales for the next round, the new material universes will be created. And once those material universes become manifest, then these Jiva Tattvas will be impregnated into those material universes so that they can continue their karmas after getting the specific types of material bodies. This Mahavishnu is the plenary portion of the Lord Sri Krishna, who is mentioned in the Brahma Samhita 5.48 as follows. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the original personality of Godhead, Govinda, whose plenary portion is Mahavishnu. All the Brahmas, the heads of the universes, live only for the period of his exhaling after the universes are generated from the pores of his transcendental body. So the material universes in the form of water bubbles, they are formed when Mahavishnu exhales, and when he inhales, then all the Mahatatvas, meaning the material universes, and the Jiva Tattvas get merged into the body of Mahavishnu. Thus, Govinda or Lord Krishna is the cause of Mahavishnu also. The ladies talking about this Vedic truth must have heard it from authoritative sources. An authoritative source is the only means of knowing about the transcendental subject matter, definitely. There is no alternative. The merging of the living beings into the body of Mahavishnu takes place automatically at the end of Brahma's 100 years. But that does not mean that the individual living being loses his identity. The identity is there, and as soon as there is another creation by the supreme will of the Lord, all the sleeping, inactive living beings are again let loose to begin their activities in the continuation of past different spheres of life. So it is just that when Mahavishnu inhales, all the material universes together with the Jiva Tattvas merge into the body of Mahavishnu in such a way that the Jiva Tattvas take temporary refuge, like a temporary residence within the body of Mahavishnu, until the new material universes are created for the next cycle. So even when the Jiva Tattvas get merged into the body of Mahavishnu, they still remain as individual spirit souls. And this has been explained by Krishna himself in Gita 15.7, where Krishna says, Mamayavanso Jiva Loki, Jiva Bhutta Sanatana, Manasasthana Prakritistani Karshati. The living entities are eternal fragmented parts and parcels of Krishna. So even the Jiva Tattvas within the material creation, even they remain as individual spirit souls even after being merged into the body of Mahavishnu. When Mahavishnu exhales for the next round, then even these individual spirit souls, they get impregnated into the newly created water bubbles or material universes. So then from there, these individual spirit souls, they get to engage in their karmas until the annihilation takes place, whether it's the partial annihilation during Brahma's night or complete annihilation, which happens at the end of Brahma's life after 100 years. It is called Suptotita Nyaya, or awakening from sleep, and again engaging in one's respective continuous duty. So when the living entities are merged into the body of Mahavishnu, so at that time, neither the living entities nor the material universes are manifest until Mahavishnu exhales for the next round. So the material universes are not manifest. So even the Jiva Tattvas, they don't have their material identity. They remain spirit souls. They remain as individual spirit souls, but they don't have their material bodies to engage in karmas. So it appears like they are in deep sleep when they are merged within the body of Mahavishnu. However, they still remain as individual spirit souls. When a man is asleep at night, he forgets himself, what he is, what his duty is, and everything of his waking state. But as soon as he awakens from slumber, he remembers all that he has to do and thus engages himself again in his prescribed activities. The living beings also remain merged in the body of Mahavishnu during the period of annihilation, But as soon as there is another creation, they arise to take up their unfinished work. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 8.18 and 8.19. So in Gita 8.17, in the purport of 8.17, Prabhupada explains regarding how the duration of a Brahma's life is calculated. But in 8.18 and 8.19, the process of how the material universes are created, how Brahma himself takes birth, and how he also dies after 100 years. And all those processes are explained. Particularly in 8.19, Krishna explains how this process takes place again and again, meaning that the process of birth and death for the conditioned souls who get to take up different material bodies, this process keeps continuing every time the material universes are created and annihilated. So the living entities, when they are merged within the body of Mahavishnu, they are engaged in deep sleep. But once they gain their new material bodies within the newly created material universes, they engage in their karmas according to the material body which they have obtained, and also based on their consciousness. So if the previous karma of that living entity kind of qualified that living entity to get the body of an animal, then once the material universes become manifest, that living entity will get the body of the material body of an animal and will be engaged in such karmas until and the process of creation and annihilation continues. So this birth and death of living entities within the material universes merely refer to the process of changing material bodies. So this we have also seen in Gita chapter 2, especially like in verses 2.12, 13, also in 2.20, 2.22. So in all those verses, the distinction between the spirit soul and the material body are explained. So the material body keeps changing, not just not just due to the transmigration of the soul, but even when the soul is encased in one particular type of material body, even that material body keeps changing. Like in what is mentioned in Gita 2.13, Denosmin yata de kaumara yavanam jara tata deantra pratir dhiras tatra namuhyati. So the embodied soul, like when a soul is embodied within a human body, it appears like the soul is undergoing changes from boyhood to youth to old age. And similarly, it appears like the soul undergoes another major change at the time of death. So these changes, whether during the period when the soul is encased within the same material body, or even after death, when it gives up the current body and takes up another material body. So this process will keep continuing until the living entity gets liberated. So similarly, even for us, unless we take to the process of Krishna consciousness very seriously, we will also likely remain in this material universe and be trapped in this endless cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. And that is also due to our degraded condition. Though we are originally spirit souls, now due to our position of being conditioned souls, being conditioned by these three modes of material nature, so we are forced to go through this endless cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. So only liberation and elevation to the spiritual abode of Krishna could save us from this endless cycle. The Lord existed before the creative energy was set in action. The Lord is not a product of the material energy. His body is completely spiritual, and there's no difference between his body and himself. Before creation, the Lord remained in his abode, which is absolute and one. So Mahavishnu, who resides in the Karana ocean or causal ocean, he himself, he is an expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Srimad Bhagavatam, who resides in Goloka Vrindavan. So Krishna himself is the source of Mahavishnu, and therefore this entire material energy and all the byproducts of material energy, like the three modes of material nature, are all products of the material energy of the Supreme Lord. It's not the other way around. So the Supreme Lord is never subservient to this material energy or the modes of material nature. So that's how Krishna becomes the source of everything, even Mahavishnu, not just for Mahavishnu, even for Garbhagriha Sai Vishnu and Shirodaka Sai Vishnu. Text 22. Saiva bhuyo nijavirya choditam swajiva mayam prakritim sishrsatim anama rupatmani rupanamani vidit samano anusasara sasrakrit. The personality of Godhead, again desiring to give names and forms to his parts and parcels, the living entities, place them under the guidance of material nature. By his own potency, material nature is empowered to recreate. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord, as mentioned by Krishna in Gita 15.7. They are of two varieties, namely Nitya Mukta and Nitya Baddha. The Nitya Muktas are eternally liberated souls, and they are eternally engaged in the reciprocation of transcendental loving service with the Lord in his eternal abode beyond the manifested mundane creations. But the Nitya Baddha, or eternally conditioned souls, are entrusted to his external energy, Maya, for rectification of their rebellious attitude toward the Supreme Father. Nitya Baddhas are eternally forgetful of their relation with the Lord as parts and parcels. They are bewildered by the illusory energy as products of matter, and thus they are very busy in making plans in the material world for becoming happy. They go on merrily with plans, but by the will of the Lord, both the plan makers and the plans are annihilated at the end of a certain period, as above mentioned. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9.7 as follows: O son of Kunti, at the end of millennium, all the living entities merge into my nature, and again, when the time of creation is ripe, I begin creation by the agency of my external energy. So this entire material creation is just a byproduct of Krishna's material energy, and the Nitya Baddhas are the embodied souls who are encased in material bodies. Like us, first of all, we fell into this material world mainly due to our material desires. It is due to our tendency to identify ourselves with our material bodies, due to our desires to become enjoyers and controllers. So that happened due to our delusion and bewilderment caused by Krishna's external energy, Maya. So we, as the Nitya Baddhas, we have forgotten our eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord due to our rebellious attitude, merely for seeking these pleasures in the material world. So we have been trying to enjoy this material sense gratification in various types of material bodies. So we have got this human body after going through the 84 lakh species of material bodies. And now after at the end of this life, this present life in this current human body, if we succeed in our practice of Krishna consciousness, we can join the Nitya Muktas who are liberated souls in the spiritual abode, and we can continue our we can regain our original constitutional position as eternal servants of the Supreme Lord and continue our devotional service in the spiritual abode. Otherwise, we are likely to continue our journey here in the material world in a different type of body. So that's how we are different from the Nitya Muktas, because the Nitya Muktas, they have actually regained their original identity. They have given up all their material bondages, even their material bodies, and they have actually regained their original transcendental bodies. That is qualitatively similar to the Supreme Lord, Satchidananda Vigraha. But as long as we remain here in this material universe, we will continue to be bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord, Maya. And though we may keep endeavoring for more and more material sense pleasures, we'll only be stuck in this incessant cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, which is completely meaningless, because the annihilation will keep coming, whether it is the partial dissolution which happens during Brahma's night, or the complete annihilation which happens at the end of Brahma's 100 years. So regardless of how much we may desire to enjoy material sense gratification, it will all come to an end ultimately. So being stuck in this bewildered condition, we only end up creating more problems by being encaged in this material body, because we are now in a degraded condition compared to our original transcendental position. The word Puya indicates again and again. That is to say, the process of creation, maintenance, and annihilation is going on perpetually by the external energy of the Lord. So, as mentioned earlier, every time Mahavishnu exhales, the new material universes are created, and the living entities get impregnated into those material universes. And then when he inhales, the material universes are destroyed through complete annihilation. And then the process keeps continuing again and again. The process of creation, maintenance, and annihilation is going on perpetually by the external energy of the Lord. He is the cause of everything. But the living beings, who are constitutionally part and parcel of the Lord and are forgetful of the sweet relation, are given a chance again and again to get rid of the clutches of the external energy and to revive the living being's consciousness. The revealed scriptures are also created by the Lord. Vedic literatures are the guiding directions for the conditioned souls, so they can get free from the repetition of creation and annihilation of the material world and the material body. So regardless of the type of body that we get, every birth, meaning every time we take up a new material body, it actually gives us a chance to progress further towards liberation by invoking and intensifying the dormant Krishna consciousness within ourselves, especially it becomes more important when we get the human form of life, because that is the time when we get the right consciousness to actually engage in spiritual inquiry and develop our Krishna consciousness, especially with the help of the revealed scriptures, which have also been revealed by the Supreme Lord himself. The revealed scriptures are often regarded as the literary incarnation of the Supreme Lord. So that's why it is important to actually understand that first we have to accept that we are stuck in this meaningless cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. Only by acknowledging the problem, we can work towards the solution. So unless we identify the problem and admit that we are actually suffering in this Dukkalayam Ashashvatam, as mentioned by Krishna himself in Gita 8.15, we can never we can never come up with the solution. And actually, there's no need for us to come up with the solution. Krishna and the entire Guru Parampara, they have all worked on the solution for us. We simply have to follow what they have prescribed for us. So that's how we can liberate ourselves from this meaningless cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. So every material body that we get is an opportunity for us to progress further towards liberation. And particularly since we have got this human form of life, and with this human consciousness, which enables us to engage in spiritual inquiry, we must make the most out of this human form of life, so that we can remain engaged in devotional service and keep remembering the Supreme Lord, so that we can elevate ourselves to the spiritual abode. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, this created world and material energy are under my control. Under the influence of Prakriti, automatically they are created again and again. And this is done by me through the agency of my external energy. So here the created world and material energy, they are all referring to the material creation, because only the material creation keeps is created again and again, because it is always subject to repeated creation and annihilation. It is the complete opposite of the spiritual world. The spiritual world is eternal. Only the material world is subject to repeated creation and annihilation, which also happens due to the will of the Supreme Lord. Actually, the spiritual spark living entities have no material names or forms. So the living entities are spirit souls. But it's just that due to our desire to engage in sense gratification, we have actually degraded ourselves to such a position where we desperately need to identify ourselves according to our material body, and also according to various other material designations like our name, racial identity, nationality, and so on. All these are meaningless material designations, because they all become null and void the moment we quit this material body. But in order to fulfill their desire to lord it over the material energy of material forms and names, they are given a chance for such false enjoyment. And at the same time, they are given a chance to understand the real position through the revealed scriptures. So we are now engaged in this material body due to our material desires, due to our desires to enjoy sense gratification. However, this is regarded as false enjoyment, because due to our original constitutional position, we can never be happy by trying to lord over this material energy of the Supreme Lord. It is always the other way around. Due to our bewilderment by the material energy of Krishna, we tend to think that we are actually enjoying in this material world. However, that's not the case. It is the material energy that is exploiting us, though we may tend to think that we are trying to enjoy it. As mentioned by Krishna himself in Gita 3.27, Prakriti Kriyamanani Gune Karmani Sarvasa Ankara Vimutatma Kartayamiti Manyate. So we, as long as we are engaged in karmas in this material world, we are merely being puppeteered by the three modes of material nature. So the three modes of material nature, which are byproducts of Krishna's material energy, they are puppeteering us. And that's how we are often engaged in our karmas according to the mixture of the modes of material nature. So even in Gita chapter 14, we have seen regarding these three modes of material nature, and even in the following chapters, especially in chapter 17 and 18, Krishna talks about how all these three modes of material nature, how they influence so many aspects of our life. Like even in chapter 14 itself, Krishna talks about how people who act in according to different modes, how they are likely to end up in different destinations. Like now we are in this Bhumandal, and by default, we as human beings, we are accustomed to acting in the mode of passion. However, we must endeavor to make the most out of our human form of life by elevating ourselves from this mode of passion to the mode of goodness, and even beyond to the mode of pure goodness. So that's how we can liberate ourselves from this material creation. Merely being in the mode of goodness is not good enough. So we have to elevate ourselves further to the level of pure goodness or Shuddha Sattva. So such aspects are described by Krishna in chapter 14 of the Gita. Even in chapter 17, we have seen aspects like Yajna, Dana, Tapa, Ahara, Shraddha, meaning austerities, charity, the food, and faith according to the three modes. And then even in chapter 18, there are many other aspects which are classified according to the three modes by Krishna, like knowledge according to the three modes, action according to the three modes, and even determination according to the three modes. So many aspects of our life in this material world are governed by these three modes. Though we may think that we are lording over this material energy, the exact opposite is true. The material energy is actually exploiting us by puppeteering us through the three modes. So that's why it is explained that we are being engaged in false enjoyment in this material world. We are thinking that we are enjoying, but actually we are not. We are simply being, we are subjecting ourselves to this meaningless cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. So during the process, we develop so many attachments through various designations, like our material, karmi, name, racial identity, religion, nationality, and so many other temporary material bondages. However, for those who have attained the human form of life, we all have the chance to completely liberate ourselves from all these material bondages, to escape from this foolishness that we are actually enjoying in this material world. So for that, Krishna has blessed us with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. The foolish and forgetful living being is always busy with false forms and false names. Modern nationalism is the culmination of such false names and false forms. Men are mad after false name and form. The form of body obtained under certain conditions is taken up as factual, and the name also taken bewilders the conditioned soul into misusing the energy in the name of so many isms. So even last week, in our last Friday session, we started studying Ishopanishad. The essence of Ishopanishad is centered around the Ishavasya principle. Even the first mantra of Ishopanishad starts with Ishavasyam idam sarvam, meaning that everything, the entire creation, regardless of whether it's the material creation or the spiritual world, everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. Therefore, we should only consume what is meant to be our own quota and not become greedy, because ultimately everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. So we should not transgress the authority of the Supreme Lord. However, foolish conditioned souls in this material world, they tend to think in terms of all these material designations like false names and forms, and also the various isms. And that's how even the demons like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, they were completely bewildered by this material energy of the Supreme Lord, to the point where they ended up acting so foolishly, to the point of even trying to transgress the authority of the Supreme Lord. Those fools like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, they took boons from exalted devotees of the Supreme Lord, like Brahma and Shiva, to fight against the Supreme Lord. So nothing could be more foolish than that. So they wanted to fight the Supreme Lord by taking boons from exalted devotees of the Supreme Lord. So even such demons exist even now in Kali Yuga. Especially now in Kali Yuga, there are quite a lot of fan clubs for those demons like Hiranyakashipu and Ravana. So this is the degraded state of Kali Jivas due to this conditioning by the three modes of material nature. However, as long as we develop our spiritual inquiry and remain engaged in devotional service, we can actually escape all these material bondages and regain our original identity. The scriptures, however, supply the clue for understanding the real position, but men are reluctant to take lessons from the scriptures created by the Lord for different places and times. For example, the Bhagavad Gita is the guiding principle for all human beings, but by the spell of material energy, they do not take care to carry out the program of life in terms of the Bhagavad Gita. So it is stated here that the Supreme Lord has provided the scriptures according to different places and times. However, this does not mean that the different versions of scriptures contain different things. No, they all refer to the same subject matter. They all refer to the Supreme Lord, knowledge regarding the Supreme Lord, whether it is the Vedas, Upanishads, or even Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. They are all dealing with the subject matter of the Supreme Lord, especially the Supreme Brahman, Brahma Vidya. It's just that the Supreme Lord has been merciful enough to encode the knowledge in according to different forms, even especially through his empowered incarnations like Vyasadeva. So we know that the Shrutis, especially the Vedas, originally the Veda was like one huge book of knowledge. So it was Vyasadeva who divided the Vedas into so many branches so that we as Kali Jivas could understand them more easily. But apart from that, Lord Krishna even gave us the Bhagavad Gita, which is regarded as the essence of all Upanishads. In Gita Mahatmya, it is stated, Sarvopanishado Gao Dokta Gopalanandana Partavatsas Sudhir Bhokta Duktam Gita Mridam Mahat. The Gita is the essence of all the Upanishads. So the subject matter is the same. There's this huge misunderstanding even among our beloved Sanatani brothers and sisters. It is okay if people from other religions, if they misunderstand that we worship many gods. However, it's not like that, because the essence of Upanishads focus on monotheism. The Upanishads focus on the Supreme Brahman, Parabrahman, that is the Supreme Lord Krishna. All the Upanishads refer to the Supreme Brahman. So there's no such thing as many gods in our Sanatana Dharma. And just because there are many scriptures, it doesn't mean that all the scriptures refer to different things. This is also another great misconception within our Sanatani community. Though there are so many different scriptures in the Vedic literature, they all talk about the same subject matter, about the same Supreme Brahman. So even the Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all the Upanishads. So they talk about the same subject matter. Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study of knowledge for one who has thoroughly understood the principles of the Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, people have no taste for them, and therefore they are under the clutches of Maya for repetition of birth and death. So this is indeed a serious problem, because first of all, whenever we try to distribute books, especially Bhagavad Gita as it is, very rarely people are willing to buy. And even for those who buy it, since the title says Bhagavad Gita as it is, they keep the book on their bookshelves as it is. And rather than studying from authoritative scriptures, our beloved Sanatani brothers and sisters, they are bewildered by Maya to the extent that they only rely on cinema, serial, and WhatsApp University to gain knowledge regarding our religion. So that is also another effect of Maya, especially on Kali Jivas. However, due to the mercy of our Acharyas, the entire Guru Parampara, we have access to so many scriptures. So it is entirely up to us. The onus is on us to completely make use of all these scriptures to succeed in our practice of Krishna consciousness. Text 23. Here is the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose transcendental form is experienced by the great devotees who are completely cleansed of material consciousness by dint of rigid devotional service and full control of life and the senses. And that is the only way to purify existence. As it is stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord can be known in his real nature by dint of pure devotional service only. So it is stated here that only the great devotees of the Lord, who are able to clear the mind of all material dust by rigid devotional service, can experience the Lord as he is. Jitendriya means one who has full control over the senses. The senses are active parts of the body, and the activities cannot be stopped. the artificial means of the yogic processes to make the senses inactive has proved to be abject failure, even in the case of great yogis like Vishwamitra Muni. Vishwamitra Muni controlled the senses by yogic trance, but when he happened to meet Menaka, a heavenly society woman, he became a victim of sex, and the artificial way of controlling the senses failed. So Vishwamitra Muni was engaged in Dhyana Yoga, even in Bhagavad Gita, especially in chapter 6. Though the chapter is titled Dhyana Yoga, even in the beginning of the chapter, Krishna gives thorough explanation about how a person should engage in Dhyana Yoga by going to Suchau Desi, to a place that is clean and quiet, how the person should close his eyes, not fully open and not fully closed, how to focus the attention at the tip of the nose. So even when Krishna gives such thorough explanation about this Dhyana Yoga, towards the end of the chapter, even Arjuna says that this process is extremely difficult to follow. Even for Arjuna, who is an exalted devotee of Krishna, even in Dwapara Yuga, a personality like Arjuna, even he himself kind of surrendered. He said that such a process is so difficult to follow. And that's why even in the last verse of Gita chapter 6, in 6.47, Krishna says, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatinam taratmana shraddhavan bhajate yamam samyuktamo mataha. The greatest bhakti yogi, the greatest yogi is the bhakti yogi, because all the different types of yoga systems, whether it's karma yoga, jnana yoga, or dhyana yoga, all these different types of yoga systems should culminate in bhakti yoga only. So that's why our acharyas have always focused on bhakti yoga, because that is the ultimate destination. So it is best to engage in the process of bhakti yoga to attain the outcome of bhakti yoga, rather than taking other difficult processes. So even in the case of Vishwamitra, for him, Dhyana Yoga did not work. But there's another exactly opposite case of this. In the case of Haridas Thakur, he not only he succeeded in resisting the advances made by the one who became known as Haridasi later. He not only succeeded in controlling his senses, he also succeeded in reforming. He reformed Haridasi to becoming a great devotee. So that is the superiority of Bhakti Yoga compared to all other processes, because ultimately all the yoga processes should culminate in Bhakti Yoga only. Otherwise, it's useless. Whether we engage in Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Dhyana Yoga, if it does not culminate in Bhakti Yoga, then it's useless. So simply by following the instructions of our acharyas, we can simply take up this easy process of Bhakti Yoga by simply chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So that is the simplest way to keep our senses engaged in the transcendental pleasure of chanting and hearing the holy name, so that we can also engage in constant remembrance of the Supreme Lord. So that would really help us to pass our final exam, as mentioned by Krishna in Gita 8.5. In the case of a pure devotee, the senses are not at all artificially stopped from doing anything, but they are given different good engagements. When the senses are engaged in more attractive activities, there is no chance of they are being attracted by any inferior engagements. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the senses can be controlled only by better engagements. Devotional service necessitates purifying the senses or engaging them in the activities of devotional service. Devotional service is not inaction. Anything done in the service of the Lord becomes at once purified of its material nature. The material conception is due to ignorance only. There's nothing beyond Vasudeva. The Vasudeva conception gradually develops in the heart of the learned after a prolonged acceleration of the receptive organs. But the process ends in the knowledge of accepting Vasudeva as all in all. In the case of devotional service, this very same method is accepted from the very beginning. And by the grace of the Lord, all factual knowledge becomes revealed in the heart of a devotee due to dictation by the Lord from within. Therefore, controlling the senses by devotional service is the only and easiest means. So this is the biggest advantage of Bhakti Yoga, because it focuses on how we can engage our senses in devotional service. Bhakti Yoga, it's not about escapism. It does not talk about going to a secluded place and withdrawing from the world. We can still remain engaged in all our material duties, but simply by engaging our consciousness, by fully focusing on the Supreme Lord, we can purify our senses and even our karmas. So that's what even the Supreme Lord wants from us. Arjuna was not a sannyasi or a brahmachari. He was a married man. He was a kshatriya. So still the Supreme Lord wanted Arjuna to receive the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and still remain engaged in his duty of fighting. In Gita 8.7, Krishna says, Tasmat sarvesu kaleshu ma manusmana yudhyacha mai arpita mano buddhir ma mevaishishi asamshaya. Therefore, always remain engaged in your duty of fighting by remembering me always. That's what the Supreme Lord wants from us also. We can always remain engaged in our material duties, but we just have to remember the Supreme Lord always. That remembrance will only come if we remain engaged in devotional service, especially in Shravanam and Kirtanam. So apart from our usual rounds of chanting, we should also try to occupy ourselves with more Shravanam, especially like listening to lectures. So by doing so, we will gain authoritative and authentic knowledge from the parampara. So that's how we can keep ourselves occupied. So we don't have to withdraw completely from our material duties or from the from other affairs of the outside world. We can still remain engaged, but it's just that we have to make sure that we also keep our senses busy with devotional service like Shravanam and Kirtanam. By doing so, our heart will become purified, because that will be taken care of by Krishna himself as the super soul. So it is not like we have to wait for the cleansing process to take place, and then only we have to start chanting. The cleansing process will take place only after we start chanting. It doesn't matter whether it's one round or 2 rounds or even 16 rounds. However, it's quite impractical and not sustainable for neophyte devotees, because jumping to 16 or 32 rounds for neophyte devotees is not very advisable, because they cannot, it's very unlikely that they can sustain it in the long run. So it is best to simply start chanting even for 1 or 2 rounds. However, it's advisable if even neophyte devotees, if they can start with 4 or 8 rounds per day, then gradually they can advance towards 16 rounds, because the more they start to engage themselves in Shravanam and Kirtanam, then they will experience the higher taste. So that's what it is also stated here. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that the senses can be controlled only by better engagements. So the more we engage our material senses in better engagements like Shravanam and Kirtanam, we will automatically gain the higher taste. And that's how the cleansing process takes place. It's not like we can wait forever for our hearts to become cleansed and then we can start chanting. No, it doesn't work that way. We have to start immediately, and only then the cleansing process will take place. If we are not going to start, if we are not going to endeavor sincerely, then Krishna will also be merciful enough to give us different material bodies so that we can remain in our business of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Text 24. Oh, dear friends, here is that very personality of Godhead whose attractive and confidential pastimes are described in the confidential parts of Vedic literature by his great devotees. It is he only who creates, maintains, and annihilates the material world, yet remains unaffected. As it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, all the Vedic literatures are glorifying the greatness of Lord Sri Krishna. Here it is confirmed in the Bhagavatam also. The Vedas are expanded by many branches and sub-branches by great devotees and empowered incarnations of the Lord, like Vyasa, Narada, Shukadeva Goswami, the Kumaras, Kapila, Prahlada, Janaka, Bali, and Yamaraja. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam, especially the confidential parts of his activities are described by the confidential devotee, Shukadeva Goswami. In the Vedanta Sutras or Upanishads, there is only a hint of the confidential parts of his pastimes. So the difference between Upanishads and literature like Gita and Bhagavatam is that the Upanishads are quite cryptic and confidential. So it is not easy for us to understand the Upanishads simply by reading those verses directly. So we can only understand the meaning of Upanishads by studying our Acharya's commentary. Not just for Upanishads, even for Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, we are not going to understand anything simply by reading the shlokas alone. We still need to study the purports given by Srila Prabhupada. So only then we can understand even this simplified cream of the Vedic literature, like Gita and Bhagavatam. So Krishna himself, he has been merciful enough to give us the knowledge, the transcendental knowledge in the form of Gita. He created the essence of all the Upanishads in the form of Gita. But we are not content with that. We even focus on further compressing and distorting the message of Gita in the form of WhatsApp forwards. In such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads, the Lord has expressively been distinguished from the mundane conception of his existence. His identity, being fully spiritual, his form, name, quality, paraphernalia, etc., have been elaborately distinguished from matter, and therefore he is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent persons as impersonal. But factually, he is the Supreme Person, Bhagavan, and he is partially represented as Paramatma or impersonal Brahman. So the Upanishads talk about the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Person, Parabrahman, and he is distinct from the living entities. In verse 22, we saw the distinction between Nitya Muktas and Nitya Baddhas. So Nitya Muktas are the liberated souls. Nitya Baddhas refer to the conditioned souls who are trapped in the embodiment, material embodiment. So even in Gita chapter 15, Purushottam Yoga, in verses 15.16, 17, and 18, Krishna talks about the fallible and infallible beings. In those three verses, Krishna talks about the distinction between the fallible beings who are referred to, who are the Nitya Baddhas. The fallible beings are Nitya Baddhas of this material world, the infallible beings are the Nitya Muktas, who belong to the spiritual abode. The liberated souls who have been liberated to the spiritual world, they are known as Nitya Muktas or the infallible being. However, it is also stated by Krishna in chapter 15 of the Gita that him being Purushottama is transcendental and he is beyond these fallible and infallible beings. So, even based on what Krishna says in the Gita, chapter 15, Krishna himself makes it very clear that he, as the transcendental supreme person, Purushottam, he is beyond the fallible and infallible beings. He is not identical even to the liberated beings. He is still superior even to the liberated beings, the Nitya Muktas. So even the Nitya Muktas, even after liberation, they are still subject to the Supreme Lord. Even in Katha Upanishad, there are descriptions regarding how the Supreme Lord continues to be the director, the Supreme Director of even the liberated beings. Even after death and liberation, even the liberated beings are still under the control of the Supreme Lord. So, apart from that, even in Gita 15.7, Krishna talks about how the living entities are his eternal fragmental parts. So, even by looking at all these verses spoken by Krishna himself in the Gita, all these verses further confirm the validity of the Dvaita philosophy, meaning that the Supreme Lord is distinct from the living entities. The living entities are only parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, and there's no such thing as this merging into oneness with the Supreme Lord. The living entities are always eternal parts and parcels, whether it is in the condition of Nitya Baddhas, in the condition of conditioned souls, or even in the condition of Nitya Muktas. Even after liberation, we will continue to remain as individual spirit souls. Though we are in the spiritual world, we continue to remain as individual liberated beings, distinct from the Supreme Lord. So even this have been confirmed by Krishna himself in verses 15.16 to 15.18 in the Gita. So all these are completely, they further validate Dvaitavad, the Dvaita philosophy. So the Supreme Person as the complete whole, he is a personality, and the partial Paramatma representation and even the impersonal Brahman representations are only partial representations, which are like subsets of his entire identity of being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's all for today. We are completed up to text 24. Any questions or comments? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, no Prabhu. Everything was very clear, Prabhu.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Yeah, okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhu.